Good morning, everyone. My name is Jason Brooks. I'm a pediatric orthopedic surgeon from the Scottish Rite Hospital for Children in Dallas, Texas. And I also serve as a chair for the podcast committee for the Scoliosis Research Society. And you are listening to another episode of Scoliosis Dialogues. I am extremely excited to welcome our guest for today, Dr. Brian Neuman from WashU. Thank you so much for being here, Dr. Neuman.
Great. Thanks, Jason, for having me. It's great to see you again.
Great to see you also. So we're going to get into a little bit of personal details about you, and then we'll get into the amazing research that you were part of. So first, I just wanted for you to chat about just where were you born and how did you spend some of those formative years of your childhood?
Yeah, so I was born in a small town called 84. Never thought it was interestingly named until I went to college, or everyone else thought it was interesting, but after a number. So it's about 45 minutes outside of Pittsburgh in the southwest area. So I grew up there with, I have 3 siblings and grew up there my whole life. And we were big there in that area, is big in wrestling. So we were really big about wrestling, and that has really kind of shaped me part of who I am today. So that's what I spent a lot of my time doing there in my young years.
Perfect. Can you just give me a bit of history? Like, so when you would write your address, you would put the number 84, or you would spell out 84.
Yeah, so I guess you could do it either way, but the technical way to do it is actually to write it out. Was the way that we would do it. And like I said, I never thought it was anything interesting until I went to college, and people were like, "Your place is named after a number," and so be it. It's interesting.
Wow. Okay. All right. Cool. So that's a good way to start out. And so you mentioned you had 3 siblings, but what did your parents do for a living, and did that at all influence your decision to go into medicine?
Yeah, I don't have any family in medicine. I'm the first one to go into medicine. My dad has his own business. He's a painter and a carpenter. My mother, she had various jobs in the past. She was a dental hygienist and then a real estate agent. And after she put the 4 of us through college, she then went to college herself, and now she is an elementary teacher.
That's
So
really, really cool.
their experience haven't really formed me into kind of medicine, but they have really ingrained in me the hard work that is needed to get to where you need to be in life.
So then, how did the idea of becoming a doctor, come about? Did you have some local doctor that you shadowed that kind of put that spark in you, or where did it come from?
Yeah, I really enjoyed, in my young years, kind of learning about physiology and the way the body works. As being an athlete, as everybody, we all have a friend that's an orthopedic surgeon when you get injuries. So I had one that was in my town that I would kind of shadow in clinic and also in the operating room, and really liked the aspects of orthopedics. It really got me interested into medicine and then into orthopedics.
Excellent. So you obviously got into medical school and then you went into residency. I think everyone might have a vague idea of what they were interested in when they start in orthopedic residency. Did you know you wanted to specialize in spine surgery? And if so, or even if not so, who were your spine mentors?
Sure. So, once again, having this sports background, I kind of thought I was going to do sports medicine. It was really what I kind of thought this is what I wanted to be. I had this goal and aspiration to be the lead physician for the Pittsburgh Steelers. Everyone has that goal when they're a kid.
Yeah.
So going into residency, I kind of went that mentality and that process. But as I was in residency, I kind of started really enjoying other aspects of orthopedics. And one of the main things I really enjoyed was spine. I really liked the thought process behind it, taking care of the patients, the intricacy about the surgery, how the physical exam, radiology, the surgery all come together to play to improve these patients. So that's really got my interest. And then, I went to Jefferson is where my residency was. And, we have a good relation with DuPont, and that's where we would do our PEDS rotations. And it's really the time that I spent with Suk and Shaw there that really got me interested in kind of the deformity perspective of things with that. So being at Jefferson, we had some great mentors, Dr. Todd Albert, Alex Ficaro, Alan Hillebrand, Greg Anderson, and then Suk and Shaw as well. It was all really people that really kind of helped me formulate my career and my decision process of saying, you know what, I really want to go into deformity surgery. And that's what then got me interested to go into WashU for my fellowship, where I could train with Larry Lanke and Dan Rue and Keith Bridwell.
That's excellent. Yeah. And of course, you just mentioned a number of SRS members and past, even some SRS presidents who were your mentors. So it's no surprise that you are where you are now in your career. However, I met you when you joined faculty at Johns Hopkins. And so was that your first job out of fellowship? If not, then where did you work when you first finished your fellowship with Larry Lenke in St. Louis?
Yeah. So after finishing my fellowship, I told myself, I want to have a deformity practice. I really want to be involved and take care of deformity patients, obviously from my training. And that really made me look for careers or job paths that really could have that foundation for it already, and also let me continue to grow and still learn from them. And that's what brought me to Hopkins. Hopkins was my first job there, and I've been having the fortunate to learn from Dr. Paul Sponseller, Dr. Cal Kabesh, Dr. David Cohen, all big deformity surgeons that are there, that really kind of helped me continue to my path of growing in my career there. And that's kind of what brought me there. And I really enjoyed my 9.5 years there.
Wow, 9.5. Wow,
Time
okay.
flies, huh?
Yeah, I know. So it's interesting. This interview is particularly special for me because you were my attending when I was a resident, and it's interesting how your experience can shape your own perspective. I thought all spine surgery that existed was what we did, which every surgery seemed to be some big, humongous, multi-level deformity corrections, and it wasn't really till I was studying for my written boards that I talked to folks from other programs. I realized, oh, some people mostly just did single level disc surgery. And I'm like, really? I didn't know that that existed. So it was quite a different experience when you were a resident at Hopkins with the vast deformity experience that was there. So that's excellent. So, you were in a place of greatness when it came to deformity, but then you decided that you needed to make that jump to the next job. There may be others, and again, you did that almost 10 years into practice. There may be others who are listening to this who are potentially making that same decision earlier in their practice, or maybe right about the same point as you are. How did you go about deciding that it was time to take that next step? And what advice would you have for other spine surgeons who are younger in practice and maybe considering what the next step might be?
Yeah, no, great question. So, I was fortunate that I love my time at Hopkins, and I really got the things that I needed from there, working there. And what I did in the beginning is I set a career path. I said, where do I want to be in 2, 5, 10 years, and where do I want to be in 20 years? So I really set a roadmap for myself. I was not looking to leave Hopkins in any way or shape or form, but I was always interested in the time frame they have now is really to have more of a leadership role within a department in some aspect. And it just what just happened that WashU presented that to me and asked me if I'd want to come here and become the chief of spine and do that leadership aspect. So I think I was fortunate enough that I wasn't really looking for it. Nothing really kind of drove me away from Hopkins. I really enjoyed everything that I had there, and I thought I had a very successful career clinically and academically. I just was presented with another opportunity to continue to get to where I was or where I wanted to be on my 20-year track. In 10 years, I wanted to be kind of in a division, help kind of grow that, help kind of develop something. And it just happened that this was presented around the right time for me to do that.
That's awesome. That's awesome. That's really good to hear. So then you mentioned that your new role is being the chief of spine at WashU. There have been many storied leaders that have come out of there. So is that the role that Keith Bridwell previously held, or Larry Lenke, or Mike? Um, I'm blanking on his last name. I can't believe it.
Mike
Mike
Kelly.
Kelly. Yeah,
Yeah.
Mike the Kelly. Like, so whose role did you step into?
Yeah, so this has been passed down, through the years. It was, where Keith Bridwell were, Larry Lenke was, Manish Gupta had it, and Jake
I see.
Bohosky has recently had it. And now I've been fortunate and humbling to kind of be in that position where they're. And I would say that they have really what has really attracted me to this job is they have really led the foundation here. We have a very strong reputation nationally here as well, and really set the groundwork for me to kind of continue to work on that. And I hope I can do just as great a job as those people behind me did that as well. And I'm going to lean on them for advice as I run into any roadblocks that they have had here as well. But those will be the people that I'm kind of filling in those shoes in there, and excited to do. And hopefully I could do just as great of a job.
Well, we have no doubt about that at all, Dr. Neuman, and congratulations on this new role. But really, this episode is to talk about your research article that was recently published in the Spine Deformity Journal titled Return to Work After Adult Spinal Deformity Surgeon. You were the lead
The
author on this
Scoliosis
paper,
Research
with
Society
senior
is a
author
nonprofit professional
being Dr.
organization
Khalid
made up
Kabesh,
of
as
physicians and
well as
allied
this
health
seems to
personnel.
be
Their
a paper
primary
with the
focus is on providing
ISSG, the
continuing medical
International Spine
education for
Study Group.
healthcare professionals and
So,
their funding and support
from
of
reading your
research in spinal
paper, it looked
deformities.
like you had
Please visit
three
srs.org
primary
for further
goals here.
information.
The first goal being that you wanted to figure out the proportion of patients that return to full-time work at various points after adult spine deformity surgery. You wanted to look at whether the invasiveness of the spine surgery affected when they returned to full-time work. And then you hypothesized that potentially adult spine surgery shouldn't limit the percentage of patients who actually return to full-time work. And so it's a really interesting just concept because as surgeons, we don't just want to make the x-rays look perfect, but we also want our patients to get back to their regular quality of life. And so it's really interesting that you guys decided to look at this question. What I wanted to ask you about is you measured the invasiveness of the procedure by a adult spine deformity surgical and radiographical index. And it actually says that you were the lead author in developing this index. Can you talk about that development a little bit more? How you went about developing the index and whether you use it in your clinical practice or is it just a research tool?
Yeah, great. So when I with the ISSG, we kind of looked into this idea here. We were kind of thinking through it and understanding that there's a lot of heterogeneous types of problems with adult spine deformity, and there's also a heterogeneous way to treat these problems. So in the literature, we looked at, they have the MRSA classification that was used for invasiveness of spine surgery. That classification looked into different aspects of surgery, such as effusion, decompression, but it really didn't go into the heart of what we kind of do with deformity. They didn't have the osteotomies, they didn't have the revision surgery, they didn't have the pelvic fixation, they didn't have the change of the radiographic parameters. So we felt that we could potentially improve that by adding in those parameters as well and looking at that. So we went through our database and we looked at those different parameters to give each of those parameters a score based on how involved they are with the invasiveness. And we consider what invasiveness was based off of blood loss and operative time, and that's what they did in the MRSA study as well. So we took that same concept, but then we kind of triggered it to factors that we use in deformity surgery to give them that point system so we can come up with this score. The reason for the scoring system to be developed, as I mentioned, is the treatment is very heterogeneous. So, if you read the literature in the past, a lot of things were, adult spinal deformity, or everything was lumped together, or they were separated by one factor. This is really trying to develop, different aspects or categories of adult spinal deformity surgery, lump those together, and then kind of compare those different ones. So now we're not comparing apples to oranges. We're kind of categorize these into groups. I do use it in my clinical practice, and it is definitely a research tool that we use to compare. And we, it's one of the factors that play in the patients. It's, we also look at frailty or patient factors that play in this as well. And we're finding ways to kind of incorporate them together to come up with evaluating perioperative course outcomes and complications.
And is this index validated? I didn't read the baseline paper for the development of that, but is this validated?
Yeah, so we developed in one of our ISCG databases, then we validated in another, and it has been validated through that, and we've been using it in multiple studies, and it has been validated throughout that it does have a factor. I wouldn't say, obviously there's some flaws to it or some things that don't make it the best, but I definitely think it is a great way to categorize it, and for us to do what we want to do is compare different types of ASD surgery and see how they compare to one or the other.
That's really interesting. I'm a peds spine surgeon, and so my mind's already racing. Fortunately, a lot of the stuff that you'll have to do for every adult patient, we normally don't have to do. And so, but just for those who haven't seen this index, it's pretty interesting. If you do a regular decompression, you get 1 point. If you do a fusion, that's 2 points per vertebra. If you do a 3-column osteotomy, that's 14 points per osteotomy. If you do a regular Smith-Peterson osteotomy, that's just 1 point per osteotomy. If you do like an ALIF, you get 8 points per interbody fusion. And so it's very interesting how they assign points, and certainly something that you all should look at. It's a nice table that they have in there. So along those lines, you all had some really interesting results, which I'll just kind of go through here for our listeners, because again, the whole goal is trying to see, do we get our patients who have adult spine deformity back to full-time work? So what you found was that postoperatively, 15% of patients who were employed were working full time at 6 weeks after surgery. 70% were working full time 6 months after surgery. 83% were working full time 1 year after surgery, and 84% at 2 years after surgery. But I think more importantly, when you compare patients who were employed pre surgery to post surgery, you had more patients able to return to full-time work at 2 years post-op at 84% versus 69% of patients who were actually fully employed. So it actually looks like your invasive intervention actually increased the number of adults who were able to return to full-time work, which I think is absolutely great. But I would push on that a little bit and just ask, with many patients living paycheck to paycheck, is 84% good enough? Should we be pushing for higher, or is that not realistic based off of how disabling sometimes these spine deformities are?
Yeah, I think that you make a valid point there. I think us getting them back, more patients back after surgery than before, I think is a great aspect that we can do. The question always is, there's many things that play into it. So not only does our surgery play into it, but patient factors play into it, and also as well, the ability to get a job also playing as well. So our goal is to try to get that to 100% if we can. But the reality is we are improving into that direction. And I think the biggest thing to take from it is that we have more people working after the surgery than they were before.
I think that's excellent. And also, it should hopefully help surgeons who specialize in adult spinal deformity to really have that conversation with their patients, to just set expectations about when they're going to really get back to full-time work, so they can talk to their own bosses and kind of let them know. And so that is excellent. Just to go back to the personal aspect again, I love touching on work-life balance. And so on that personal side, do you have a marriage partner? And if so, do you have any children?
Yes, so I'm married, and we have a 22-month-old and a 5-month-old. So we moved to St. Louis, and a month later we had one of our kids, and so big changes happened, but we're loving every minute with both of them.
That is excellent. Now, you are the chief of spine surgery now, so you have a big leadership role. What does work-life balance look for you with two young children and a leadership role? How do you find that balance when it comes to writing papers, doing cases? What advice would you give to people with how you approach that?
Yeah, no, great point. I think one, I have to give my wife a lot of credit. She takes care of the kids a lot and helps me out a lot and gets me where I want to be. I think the biggest thing that I've learned with this new transition, another kid, is communication. Letting my wife know what my calendar is and what my schedule is in regards to that. I think that's the biggest thing. Everyone going to bed at 8 o'clock helps me out, because then I can do work when they're all asleep at night. So that's a good aspect that I have as well. But the one thing I would say from the work balance line of life that I'm trying to do a little bit more of is I'm trying to be more present when I'm in a situation. And what I mean by that, when I'm with my kids, I really have my phone away. I really have not really doing any work, not doing emails. I'm really spending my time with them. And then when I'm working, I'm working and feeling it there. So I think that has been helping me. And I think that, at least in my opinion, thinks my kids enjoy more time with me whenever it's kind of one-on-one and I'm spending that time with them without any interruptions.
That's excellent. Well, we really appreciate you taking this time to chat with us. Again, for those who haven't read this paper, I definitely encourage you to go to the latest Spine Deformity Journal and please download it. It's an excellent read. And even as a peds person, I really actually enjoyed it, because sometimes some of our pediatric patients will eventually need additional adult spine deformity surgery. And so I definitely encourage you all to read this paper. And thank you again, Dr. Neuman, for your time.
Great. Thank you. I really appreciate you taking time doing this and the SRS putting this together. So really appreciate your time as well.
The Scoliosis Research Society is a nonprofit professional organization made up of physicians and allied health personnel. Their primary focus is on providing continuing medical education for healthcare professionals and on funding and supporting research in spinal deformities. Please visit srs.org for further information.